All right, we're on. Nervous, Pi? Ready to go. All right. Firstly, let's start with you. So, what year were you born?
I'm in 30.
And where were you born?
I was born in Melbourne.
And you were born into a family. Tell me about that family. Start with your parents.
Mother and father.
Yep.
One father was a Catholic,
Name?
Eric Willoughby.
Yep.
Funny name. My mother's name was Helena Florence
Yep.
Milty. My father. Do you want me to go into the family?
Yeah.
With the family?
Go.
Righto. Well, on the father's side.
Eric Mosley.
Given
Mosley was his last name.
Brown.
So his middle name was Mosley.
My father's name was Brown.
Yeah, what was his middle name?
Willoughby.
Oh, Willoughby. Yeah, go.
Right. He was one of two children.
Yep.
His father, I must add, right from the start, I know very little about my ancestors. It was never talked of at home. For what reasons, I've never bothered to find out. But it was virtually never discussed. So, as far as my father's side was concerned, his father was a reporter for the Herald Sun and died at the age of 60, well before I was born. His mother came from an Irish family who migrated to Port Fairy around about the 1840s. How they married, I do not know.
Yep.
But they were married and had a father and a younger daughter.
And they were all in around the Melbourne area?
All in the Melbourne area.
Yep.
I won't elaborate any further, but that gives a basis. They lived their life in a place called North Carlton.
North Carlton.
And they were Catholics. My mother came from a farming family in the Woomera area. Her mother married a German named Milty, Milte.
Yeah.
I know nothing more than that. But he apparently died after they had three daughters in the country and moved to North Fitzroy sometime, an adjacent suburb to North Carlton.
Okay.
Father and mother married. Under what circumstances, I do not know. But after that, religion was never spoken of. The other strange aspect about the family is my mother, sisters married, but never had children.
Okay.
My father's sister had 4 children, one which was mentally affected and lived in a home. But until she had the other 2 children, she looked after her widowed mother in North Carlton for the first part of, I suppose, 45 years of their marriage. So that my upbringing has basically been in a family situation where only the children that I related with were my own family. Or those in the street.
So you had never had sort of relationships with, or, relationships that we would have.
That's
with extended members of the family.
I was getting at. So different to the relationships that exist within families today.
And was that a product of the time, or was that a product of something within the family?
I think basically it was a product of the time. Number one, it was when I was born. It was in the start of the Depression.
Yep.
So people who were lucky enough to have a job
Mm.
didn't have a great deal of money. Unfortunately, we lived in a street where everybody had a working parent,
Yes.
but
Parent. Only one.
eh,
Only one.
only one, yeah, most decidedly.
Yep.
And the fact that though, whilst everybody knew one another personally and would talk to people across the fence
Yes.
or in the street, there was never any relation or socialising with families, other families in the street. So the families were sort of a small nucleus within themselves and kept that way.
But isn't that funny? Because you just sort of described the, street or the community as your family earlier.
Definitely. And yet, yes, mate, look, it was like that, but there was still a barrier. Like, you got to the fence of the house,
Mm.
and that's basically as far as you went.
So people didn't socialise like they do today.
You would never see two mothers being invited, or mothers being invited into another house for a cup of tea.
And would two fathers have
And
a
the fathers
beer?
they would talk to one another in the street and over the fence,
But
you
their
never-
home was their own.
but you never see one coming in, some coming for a beer like they would do nowadays.
Isn't that interesting?
It is. And I think to a large extent, that social situation growing up
Mm.
has been one of the telling factors in my sort of outlook on the years that I've lived.
Interesting. Very interesting. So, continuing with your family, what about well, let's stay with your mother and father before we get to your siblings. So, what did they do? What was their, I assume only your father worked?
Well, first of all, my mother
Mm.
was a housewife
Yes.
and a good housewife.
Product of the time?
You know?
A product of the
Oh,
time?
no doubt about it.
Mm.
And obviously,
Why was she a good housewife?
boy,
Why?
because in those days, once a woman was married, she would become a housewife. They never would. There was never any women
Mm.
in the workforce.
Yes, but what made her a good house? Like, what do you remember
What made her?
of
Number one, that whilst we always had money coming into the household, there was never excess money that we could splurge on, or they could splurge. So that she always provided clean clothes, good meals, and
love?
love, and the how can I put it? The necessity to form a close and happy household.
Yes.
The old man was an electrical engineer who worked at the tramway workshops,
Yep.
which was about 500 metres from home. Fortunately,
What suburb was this?
this is in Preston,
Oh, yeah. Preston. Yep.
and one of the odd things that I can always remember was in those days there was never any security guards like there is today.
Or locks?
Uh,
Or keys?
so, and on odd occasions, I would have to take his lunch to the workshops. So I would walk down the street, just walk straight into the workshops, through the gates, into the workshops, straight down to his workbench and give him his lunch.
Mm.
One of the highlights of that little task was that there were separate buildings as the tram was being constructed,
Yes.
and they used to have a little trolley that used to take the tram from one building to the next across a set of tracks. And if you happened to pick the right time, you'd be able to have a little ride
And jump on.
and jump on. And it was only sort of 15 to 20 seconds,
Yeah.
but it used to be the highlight, strange it may seem.
Very nice. And so that job as an electrical engineer, I assume that was a pretty prestigious sort of, or,
Well, it was the only
significant job at the time to be an engineer during the Depression.
At the Depression, as I said, back in 1925 or thereabouts, they moved into this house, which was in Preston, and it was part of a working man's area, and most of the houses were single-story, a single house on a block.
Yep.
And it was the
Similar to your house now, or?
But all the houses were predominantly the same.
Yep.
4 or 5 bed with a board home.
Yep.
Right. And one of the most interesting aspects about that time when houses were being built was that, unlike today, where every house has a toilet inside, in those days, the toilet was the outermost part of the house, and that could only be in the main. To get there, you had to walk off the back veranda, out into the open, to the toilet.
At 2 a.m. in the morning, or whenever you needed to go.
That's it.
I remember you telling me this before, and you said that it's funny, in the old days, people used to eat inside and go to the toilet outside. Exactly. And now people go to the toilet inside and eat outside.
That's right. That was such the case.
So, you grew up in the start of the Depression. So, how would you compare your family's lives to that of the families around you? Was there less difference and variance in?
No, I would say in the main, that particular area of Melbourne, people would have been of the same social standing.
Yep.
In the main. And I say in the main because there used to be small pockets around the area where they had commission homes, where people who were out of work or couldn't afford to buy a home,
yep,
moved into these commission homes,
yep,
and paid rent. But in the main, the people moved in. One of the
still. I just want to see if it's still working.
One of the main objectives,
yep,
in those days was that if you got married, you found your own home, and people did that and paid not exorbitant, but were paying off their house for years and years to come. And as I was talking about how good my mother was, every time she got the wage or the money from her husband, she would religiously break that down and put it in different containers, such as rent, papers, food, and something like that.
So she was in charge of the microfinance of the home. She ran the budgeting.
Yeah.
So,
and I would say that type of situation would have occurred in every house.
Was it necessary to the stability of the people at that time, right?
Yeah.
So you had to get through.
Yeah. People
didn't have disposable money like they have today.
Yeah.
So tell me about your siblings.
Well, very strange situation.
How many did you have?
I had a brother who was 5 years older.
Yep.
And a sister who was 1 year younger.
And their names?
One was Eric, and the sister was Pat.
Why was it
In
strange?
those days, and as it turned out, I've thought about this many times. I can't remember virtually any time that I actually associated with my brother, other than being best man for each of our weddings.
Do you think that was an age thing, or were you?
And that was an age thing, because in those
5 years
days,
difference?
if people got married, it was a real family affair.
Yeah.
So the bridesmaids and the groomsmen came from the families.
Yep.
And I thought about why I never associated with my brother. It's not that we didn't argue or anything like that, but we just didn't associate. And I put it down to the fact that he was 5 years older than me, and where I was playing with 3-year-old mates in the street, he was virtually at the stage where he was nearly ready to go to secondary school.
Yeah.
So that he was in a different category to me.
But what about prior to that?
Well, that's my brother. So that situation never really changed throughout life for a number of circumstances, such as us moving to Sydney.
Yeah.
And as far as the sister was concerned, in those days, girls played with dolls, and boys were out there playing sport. And the two did not mix.
But what about within the family nucleus that you described?
Well, in the family nucleus,
inside the home,
we were sort of friendly, but she would still play with the dolls, and I was sporting mad, so was the old man, so I'd be out kicking football or playing cricket with the old man. So, in actual fact, within the house, it was my father who was my companion, rather than brother and sister.
And so, did your brother and sister, Eric and Pat, did they have a strong relationship, or?
It appeared to be much the same as I had when I was young, but in later life, they seemed to be more compatible. In fact, they were more compatible with one another than they ever were with me. And that makes me think, beside the black sheep of the family.
So, I know very little about your siblings. Something that you've never spoken to me about. Actually, you spoke to me about Eric the other week when I was here, and I was surprised that you had done that, just because you've never spoken about it. Do you? It's interesting because you're such a family-orientated person within my experience through my cousins and aunties and uncles and our family. So, do you have any sort of reason behind why they're so different?
Well, first of all, I have to agree totally with your assessment of me, because that's it. They're the conclusions that I've come to. Right? Why? Well, possibly sport came into it as much as anything else. My brother wasn't interested in sport of any kind, except maybe wanted to go bike riding. He never did that. But he never participated in the sport in the street. And my daughter and the sister also was not sporting minded. So that it was sort of a natural association with my old man, who was also sporting mine.
Okay.
So that it was sort of the magnet sort of just drawing the two of us together, and the other two, whilst there was never any animosity,
Mm.
just didn't exist.
And not to be insensitive, but are they still alive?
No, both died. One about brother about 5 years ago, sister about 3.
About 3. And when you moved to Sydney, you had sort of maintained minimal connection with them?
I would say that I virtually had zilch.
When was the last time you saw them both?
At my father's funeral
At your
back in 91.
91 was the last time you saw both of them?
Yeah.
Wow. All right, so we've spoken about your family. What can you tell me about Nan's family?
How much detail do you want?
Well, just wherever you want to go.
First of all, her father was a British Tom who fought in World War One.
Did he? Where did he fight? Do you know?
Eh?
Where did he fight?
In France.
What was his name?
Frank. And
Her mother?
the mother was Isabel Purdy, and she was one of 3 children. I don't know where they came from, but the father, who was still alive. Oh, sorry. Let me go back to that. Frank.
Yeah.
He came out from England after the war with his brother, and they settled in Melbourne. But how they came together, I have no idea.
Yep.
The mother was the daughter of 3, 2 other older brothers, and what they all did in that, I do not know.
And Nana and Pat's siblings?
They had
Siblings?
had an elder brother.
Yep.
And a younger sister. The brother's name was Frank, and he was a definite loner.
A definite loner.
Definite loner. But
What does that mean? What do you mean by that?
Well, he never had any friends. And by the time I got to know him,
Why? Because he was different?
well, he just loved to be by himself.
Oh, okay.
But he joined the Air Force, became a fighter pilot in the Korean War.
Wow. Did he come back from the Korean War?
Came by, yeah. He never spoke about it other than, he was great sort of flying at X speed,
That's it.
miles per hour.
Mm.
But he was a loner, and the younger sister, she was also a bit of a loner. And
What was her name?
hey,
What was her name, sorry?
her name, she asked me that. Joan.
Joan.
Yeah. So, but they sort of both, the 3 of them sort of went their own way.
Yep.
And whilst they were, they were just another ordinary family.
Yeah.
At the time.
And would you say most families were that same sort of dynamic? It was
no doubt
a
about
lot more
it.
consistent.
Yeah, exactly.
And what was your relationship with Nana's family?
I thought it was all right. Until such time, the day before our wedding, it was reported to me that Pat's mother said, "I don't know why you're all going to marry that individual.
Mm.
So there must have been something underhand that never sort of came to the fore.
And prior to, well, sorry, let's go back. So let's now go to Nan.
Huh?
Well, let's now go to Nan. So when did you meet Nan?
When did I meet her?
Yeah.
Well, I thought you would have asked that question in another way, but
Well, how should I?
well, all right.
This is my
Well,
first interview, mate. I know
it
I've no
happened
idea
to
what I'm doing.
be the most important day of my life.
That's significant.
Right. And that occurred one Thursday evening after football training, and I was standing at the doorway of a dance hall.
Mm-hmm.
Good. You've come in. Ah,
Sorry, mate. Take a sec.
well, and I saw this bird.
This bird.
Best way I can describe it.
Was she a good looking?
Across-
Was she a good looking bird?
Across the floor at the dance hall.
Yeah.
So I couldn't wait. Yeah, I couldn't wait. Oh, God. Oh, Jesus, Rob. Well, I couldn't wait till next week to get to the dance floor
Again,
again.
to see her.
And I raced across the floor, wishing you ain't going to be there. I raced across the floor.
Did you see her? Did you meet her, or did you talk to her the first time, or
No, just looked.
did you know her name? Did you know her through a friend,
You
or
never know who she was,
just a bird?
because you can imagine having been to a football meeting, we were dressed to that following Thursday night, I happened to get dressed and arouse all the suspicions.
Did your hair? You did your hair?
The lot. I could raise the suspicions of the teammates. And when she was there, I just went straight across the floor and asked for a dance.
And she said yes, obviously.
And here we are today, 80 years later.
80 years later.
Yeah,
So you were how old when you met her?
18.
18.
Yeah.
And you dated her for how long before you proposed?
2 years.
2 years. And how did you propose?
Hang on, what on?
You don't remember?
No, I don't. I remember going into the jewellery shop in Melbourne.
Yep.
And we selected a ring. And then I had to keep that and sort of make a formal proposal later on. Yeah.
And where did you get married? That was a family affair, I assume. Eric,
Uh,
your brother you never spoke to, was he your best man?
Yeah. Well, we finished up getting married in the main Church of England church in Preston on the 6th of December, 1952.
1952. 1952.
Right?
So you've been married for how long?
Your maths were as good as mine.
A long while. And so what drew you to Nan? Besides spotting her across the hall and thinking she was a good-looking bird.
That's about it.
That's about it?
That was it. Couldn't get her out of my mind for the next week. And then having had the dance, I said to her, "You go dancing in the town hall?" She said, "Yes." "Will I see you there next Saturday?" This is on a Thursday night.
Yeah.
Saturday? Yeah. She was there. And then in those days, if you had a dance whoever you danced with at the last dance of the night,
Mm.
we sort of tandem out that, you're going to be asked or being asked to take her home. Right?
There you go.
That was it. And that started,
And then so you started dating on the Saturday. That's sort of how it worked, or?
could you believe I still went down Thursday nights?
Mm. I could believe
And
that.
then, that was it.
Were you a good dancer?
I could dance.
I-
I wouldn't say I was Fred Astaire.
None loves music. None would have been a good dancer.
Yeah, so anyway, and that was the start of it all.
So tell me about your early sort of relationship with Nan before kids came about.
You're getting personal with it.
That's the point of it. What did you guys do? Where did you live?
Well, we sort of courted one another for 2 years before we got engaged.
Yeah.
I still maintained I was going to night school at the stage. Got engaged. I was still going to night school, playing sport. And at that stage, I don't know why, but she seemed happy enough to come and see me flush around the football field
Mm.
for Saturday, which became a thing. And then after we got engaged, there was a thought of, getting married where we were going to live. And as it turned out, her family had a granny flat out the back, which was being occupied by a couple of girls at the stage. And they had decided to move on. So we made preparation to move in there. And one of the things, first thing I ever made was what they call a glory box, I think they called it.
Yeah.
And it was just a box, 2.5 foot long, 18 inches wide, and 4 foot deep, in which you would put the trousseau.
Which is?
The trousseau, a wedding clothes.
Oh, wedding clothes.
Right? So I used to spend Saturday afternoon trying to make this box with the help of the old man. Right?
And your old man was quite handy?
He was great. He was a true tradesman. So anyway, we eventually got that made, and that became the in thing for 12 months.
Very nice. So, going back, I think I probably know the answer to this, but in your childhood, what did you do to entertain yourself? I assume sport. What did you do to, tell me about your childhood. What did you do to entertain yourself?
Well, here's a very strange answer for you.
AFL.
One of the greatest problems I had as a kid was a bedwetter.
That was not where I was expecting that to go.
I know. But can you imagine wetting the bed until you were 12, almost every night?
What do you think that was? With some sort of anxiety or?
No, it was just something that happened to a lot of children, and they just grow out of it.
Yeah.
But can you imagine? Here's another shocker for you. At that time, the doctor prescribed a thing called the witch pills.
Okay.
That may sort of do something to the kidneys or the bladder. And the only thing it did was to turn the urine blue.
Did that solve the problem?
No. But can you imagine the embarrassment of standing at a urinal And all the kids are saying, what's that? Where's that coming from?
That wouldn't
You
have
can,
helped your
can you
social
imagine?
standing in the school.
Can you imagine how embarrassing that is?
I don't think that would have been a joyful experience, no.
So what did I do? Well, number one was that in the street there was the assistant commissioner of scouts for the area and a number of other scouts who they all belonged to the 1st West Preston Troop. There was no Cubs, but the assistant commissioner decided he was chair or create the Cub pack.
Yep.
When I heard of it, I went absolutely ballistic and said, yeah, I'm into this. I'm into this because even though I was 6, I wanted to be a scout because everybody else, the older kids,
We're all scouts.
and even my brother was a scout. So, yeah, we're going to form this pack. I got the Cub book, and before it was even formed, I knew the tenderfoot test, the first star, the second star test. I went down to the commissioner and I said, I want to be tested. All right, we'll test. I passed the tenderfoot. Right, I would go for the first star now. Bear in mind that nothing had been formed. I passed the first star and he knocked me back on the second star.
Why?
I don't know. There was something. And I said, that can't be so. I know the book back to front. I have to come back next week. I went home in a rage, saying, I got failed, And went, I said, settle down. So anyway, I went back next week and passed. And the pack was formed, and I was so wrapped in it, I became the senior sixer. There were two packs.
Yep.
And I was the senior sixer.
Which what meant you led one of them, or?
And I know there were. Oh God, I should know. They used to have the leader of the 2 packs, and then the senior sixer. He was the number one.
You were running the show.
No, we had leaders,
Yeah.
adults, Kayla and Balu.
Yeah.
But I was the bloke that when we had a parade, I was shouting out the orders.
Really?
I was number one.
And you loved that?
I loved it. And then, and
what were you shouting out? Sort of.
Oh, I forget, but you used to have
like
a parade.
marching or.
Yeah, righto, attention.
Yeah.
And then the scout law and that would stand up, salute. And
you love the scouts?
And then, of course, the obvious thing was went to the scouts and stayed with that. And then I became a second, and then a patrol leader, which is the leader of the group, and eventually the troop leader. And once again, here I am
up the top.
When there's any functions, I'm
running the show.
Yeah, so I love that. And until such time as they decided to start a football team in the area, and the situation got to the fact that we used to have scout parades every Saturday afternoon, once a month. And I wanted to play football, which meant playing every Saturday afternoon in those days. And I had to make a choice. So I loved the sport, and so I gave the scouts away.
There was no way you could have done them both, or?
No. I said to the scout master, look, this is what I want to do. I love the scouts. No, you have to come the Sunday afternoon parades.
All right, I'm out.
So that was the end of it. So
And what age would you have been at
I
this
would have
point?
been 14.
And so that's when you started playing in an AFL team.
Yeah.
So prior to that, you were just kicking in the street or in the park.
We were lucky enough, maybe somebody had a football, which meant we could go up to a paddock or the tip, as it was called, and we'd have our own field and make up our own sides and have a game of football.
On the tip.
Oh, well, the tip was been covered in, but it was grass in a sort of a fashion.
Yeah.
And so that we became known as the Riverley Tip Boys. Right?
Riverley Tip Boys.
Yeah.
Was that a name that you gave to yourself, or?
Well, it was only because next door to the tip, firstly, was a Riverley Theatre. And they said that was it. So.
And
well, just one point.
Yes, go.
One other point. During the Scouts effort, another Scout and I got into some kind of an argument or something like that. And one night we said, got that bad. We go, come on, after Scouts.
Let's go for it.
We'll go for it. The Scoutmaster got wind of it. He said, I've heard of this. You can still have your fight. It's next Friday night. And I'll bring some gloves. You can battle it out after Scouts. So we had 3 rounds.
This is one of the adults saying this.
Yeah. No, that was okay.
Back in the day, that was how it was?
Yeah, no, far better to do that than in a street or something like that.
Yeah.
So we battled it out for 3 rounds, shook hands, then we parted our ways. I've never seen him again since.
Yep.
And after that, I said to myself, that was stupid.
At 14?
At 14. And I have never lifted my hand to anybody since. Because of the fact somebody might retaliate, I might get hurt.
So did you lose that fight?
I don't know what happened to you.
But it's just never been a natural response to a situation for you.
No, so I've never wanted to fight again. Never showed.
What about on the football field? Tell me about your.
No.
Well, just tell me about your career on the football field. I'm probably using the word career loosely, but.
Well, I started playing when I was 14.
Yep.
In an under 18 grade.
Yep.
Because we didn't have the numbers with the Riverley Tip Boys. I've got photos inside of them.
Really?
Yeah. And they formed we lost players.
You were 14 and you were playing under 18.
Under 18.
And how was your stature?
Performance.
Well, how was your stature? Like, were you a small child or?
I was a little runt.
So were you getting smashed around?
Oh, I don't know. I can't remember. But the old man was there every day.
Cheering you on?
So, and in those days, because of the hardship that was still enduring in the 1940s, we were a family that didn't have a great deal of money. We weren't destitute, don't get me wrong, but we didn't have spare money. So my old man, who was accomplished at doing anything that I could think of, used to make the stops, leather stops, put them in my boots, school boots, for Friday night. Saturday they become football boots. Sunday he would take the stops out.
Wow.
And that happened every Saturday during the football season.
And what were the other children wearing?
Much. I don't know what they were wearing. But if anybody had football boots,
it was a big deal.
That was a big deal. Big time.
And what position did you play?
I played, I think, on the half-forward flank, as in the 14, 15. And then we didn't have the players, so the team folded up, as it turned up. And I went to the team called the Swimmers. and I was still able to play a year of under 16s,
Oh yeah.
as it turned out. And I played with them for 3 years. And then when I became under 18, I was playing centre half back
Demoted.
in the side. And we had a pretty good side. We never won a premiership. We always played in the finals. And we were pretty good. And in actual fact, I was just looking at the photos the other day, and there's only 2 in that final under 18 side that I played in ever made senior football.
Really?
Yeah. 2 of them played with, I was one, played with Preston, Victorian Football Association competition, and one got to the league, Victorian Football League, played with Fitzroy.
So the Victorian Football Association, that was at the second league.
Yep.
And that's what you.
In actual fact, it was the original football league formed in Victoria, but back in the late 1890s, 1900s, the group broke away and formed the league, and they actually became the predominating team or competition.
Yeah.
And the VFA ran second, right?
And you played in that.
And I played in that, yeah.
And what age did you play in that?
I got my first senior game at 19.
Yep.
I went from last year of the 18s for a tryout at the VFA with Preston, and I was lucky enough to make the training squad.
Yep.
I played every year, every game with the seconds until the last game, and I got promoted to the first. So that was in 1949, and I think the last game was in 1960, having amassed a total of huge 65 games in the senior side.
In the first team. You played, and the whole other throughout the other 11 years you were playing in the second side.
Oh, in and out.
In and out.
In and out.
65 games for the first.
Yeah.
All down halfback.
No, I played at every position.
So you played until you were 30.
I don't know how to sort of put it. I was that close to being a good footballer.
What do you mean by that? You're obviously a decent footballer.
But I was that close to being a good regular footballer. If I got dropped, if I'd been playing in the seniors and I got dropped, I'd front up the selection committee the following week and dump the table, wanting to know, why did you drop me? And if you dropped me, what was wrong with the game and what I had to do to improve it.
Were you able to accept their criticism, or were you someone that...
No, because on several occasions I walked out telling everybody you could stick it.
Did that help your selection the following week?
I wasn't there the following week. But the desire was so great, I was back the following year.
Mm.
And I never got rejected, from the training squad.
And did you win any premierships in that time with Preston?
We only won one premiership with the seconds.
Yep.
In 1956.
And so you seemed like you were in leadership roles in the Scouts. Were you in leadership roles on the field?
In the seconds, I was sort of when I played, I was sort of the second in command because I was there so often. But in the seconds, I always played a ruck rover type of position.
Yep. And
in the seniors, I played virtually every position except the key position, on the flanks. And I also, in the last couple of years that I...
Did you ever play ruckman?
Ruck rover.
Did you ever play ruckman, though?
Well, there were times I had to go for the ruck for the simple reason that the ruckman wasn't in position.
Yeah.
But I was the ruck rover So I'd have to try and test that.
And so you obviously have a love for sport,
I did.
a massive love for sport, which you've shared onto your children and your grandchildren. So talk to me about AFL just briefly. Just talk about AFL then and AFL now.
Oh, well, the pre-season usually consist, going backwards from the first game, about 4 practice matches,
Mm.
training Tuesday and Thursday nights,
Mm.
and the ultimate pre-season training was running the block, the street block, running for about 2 kilometres.
2 kilometres.
Oh, 3 kilometres. Wasn't far. Round the set block.
And you would say if you did that,
And that was our training.
And you
That was
think-
our warm-up.
and you think you'd be all right, you think you're fit. Look at what they run nowadays, mate. They run 25k a game.
I look at the game today and say I would love to play it, and I would. I don't know how I would ever get that fit. From 2 nights training a week,
Yeah,
and even on pre-game, some might get a rub down before the game. Otherwise, you'd sit on the bench, listen to the coach talk,
and then you
then
go
run
out.
out on the field and bounce the ball.
No warm up, no
No.
nothing.
No warm-up or anything. Staggering. But the game would have suited, the style of the game would have suited my game.
Nowadays,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The way I played.
if you could have
One-
run around the block maybe 2 or 3
Yeah.
more times.
Well, one of the things I think was I had this great desire to do well. And as the coach, in retrospect, I didn't have to be told if I'd made a mistake or what I had to do. I just had to go out there and
And do it.
do it, right? So, yeah.
And during this time, were you playing cricket?
Love cricket, but
Weren't playing it.
wasn't good enough. Wasn't good enough. Loved it. But, give you an example of how I liked it. APM, where I worked, they had a cricket side, and they played in a competition called the VJCA, which was the equivalent, say, the 3rd best competition in Melbourne. And
That seems like a decent.
it was
League?
turf wickets, in closed grounds.
Yeah.
And at 17, I was playing with them in the VJCA.
Were you a batsman or a bowler? Or a specialist
I
fielder?
was a specialist fieldsman.
As was I.
So, but one day I got my name in the Sporting Globe, which was a paper that was printed every Saturday night,
Mm.
every winter and summer,
Mm.
and they had the results of the matches. They'd print the full list of in the first and second
Team.
competition,
Yeah.
district, sub-district. They would have the full list of the batting, bowlers. In the VJCA, they just had a summary. One night, Brown, 3-4 something.
Not bad.
That was good, yeah.
And did you ever get your name in the Sporting Globe for your AFL a few
Yep.
times?
Yeah, after the first match,
Really? What did they say? Horrific
said-
debut, won't see him again.
they said 3 of us got promoted, and the last comment was that Brown, Bradford, and Walker all showed promise in their first game.
There you go. Do you have any clippings of that?
I did for a while. I
Gone.
was so few and far between. Mate.
So, away from your sporting accomplishments for a minute, going back to your school, did you like school?
I like what?
School. Did you like school?
No, but I didn't hate it. I didn't detest it.
And what subjects did you not detest?
Not good at English.
Well, what subjects did you like?
I think maths, history, geography. But
Science?
not really. The reason why I took on science
Mm.
was that in those days there was the secondary school was the tech,
Yep.
which was basically there for kids who wanted to do a trade.
Yep.
And then there's the high school for those who are known as academics. And after the third form, you had to make a selection because up until then it was general education and knowledge with the basic subjects.
Yep.
After year 8 or third form, you had to make a selection whether you wanted to do commercial or science. In the commercial, you had to take singing as a subject.
Sorry. Was commercial like what, more business related?
Business related.
Why is singing related to business?
I don't know. I think it was a way of dividing up the subjects
Yeah.
and get an even balance. And whilst I loved singing, I couldn't sing for nuts.
Yeah.
I had no tone, but I liked it. But I said, I'm not going to go singing. That's stupid. So I'll do the science. And that's basically the reason why.
And that's when you started this. So isn't that interesting? Because you don't speak of, well, from what you're saying, it doesn't sound like you loved school, or did you not? Did you love learning? Because I look at you now, and you're someone that I would describe as, a continual learner, someone who's extremely inquisitive and.
It has changed. My life has changed dramatically. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't have a clue. And like most people in those days, and even today, nobody really knows what they want to do. And to some extent, you're guided and directed by your parents. My old man was an electrical tradesman, and a good tradesman. The brother followed suit, but because I didn't know which end of a hammer to hold, he said, "Oh, you can't do that. You can't. You'll have to go to the high school rather than the tech." So that was sort of the first stage in what happened to be future life.
Mm.
So I wasn't mad. I was sporting mad.
Yeah.
So,
and so that dominated the earlier years of
my
your life.
thoughts. Yeah. But if I can go back a little bit,
do whatever you want, mate.
I can't remember how young I was the first time I ever went to the football with my old man. But I guarantee I wouldn't have been 4. And I used to go to the football. We used to go regularly because he lived in Carlton. Carlton was the senior side. And we would go Saturday afternoons if they were playing home and watch Carlton. And then we'd go to Preston, but watch Preston in the VFA.
On the same day?
Not the same day, but we would go to the football. And in the summertime, we'd go and watch the cricket.
Just you and your father, not Eric.
Hey?
You and your father, not Eric.
Yeah, I know.
Your brother.
This is what I'm getting at. It was only my father and me. And we used to go everywhere to watch sport.
Mm.
In fact, so much so that I must have been 10 or 11. And he took up umpiring in the VJCA. And I used to go and watch him umpire. From 2 o'clock.
You were sport mad.
It was 6 o'clock. At a night time, and I don't know how we ever fitted everything in, but we would kick a football in the backyard or play cricket in the backyard. it seemed as though that's all I ever did with him.
Mm.
It wasn't so, I know, but that was it.
Mm.
So that we went to the football, and the greatest disappointment he ever had, we were due to go to the 1956 final day of the Olympics.
Okay.
And there was Pat, myself, and my dad. And the old man got sick. We got to his house to pick him up. I can't go. I'm crook. He had the flu or something. And he said, "No, hold on, I'm going to go." Got dressed, staggered to the front door, staggered to the gate, and had to go back. I think the greatest sporting disappointment he ever had.
So you didn't get to go.
He didn't get there.
It was that ill.
Yeah. So, sorry.
It's all right.
Uh,
Seems like you had a very special relationship with your father.
yeah, so a big disappointment. So, that was sport. And we were full. Christ. I think also that I was a good excuse that he could get out of the house to go and watch what he loved best. Yeah. So that was sport. So, and I've covered that. Ever since.
Yeah.
I love going watching you, the kids. The only ones play. Love having to go at Shane about his golfing ability. So,
It's always been a big part of your life.
yeah. So, what else was I going to say? Something else came up about that. Just thinking about the old man. The type of things like associated with the time, the money and everything. He cut our hairs for, I don't know, 10 years or something like that.
Mm.
He mended our shoes. He was a good gardener, pretty good gardener. He used to be involved in the Horticultural Society, won many blue ribbons, as did my mother.
Mm.
So this sort of family was pretty strong.
Mm.
Yeah, and I love to, and the old man sort of followed. Never got into trouble. Really, did things wrong. I used to think I was a perfect child, but I wasn't. And any time something cropped up, never got a belting.
Mm.
Never really got punished. He would stop and talk. Why did you do it? And then get around how stupid you were.
Mm.
What did you want to do? What do you want to do? Well, you can see how it's going to affect your life. Yeah, right. I agree.
Mm.
And
was that a very different approach to what other fathers were doing at the time?
I can't recall. It'd be wrong for me to make any comment.
Mm.
I don't know, but I just know the effect that he had on me. Such as, every...
Would you describe him as, your best friend when you were
Oh, no
a
doubt.
kid?
No doubt. And what I was going to say was everybody smoked. Every male smoked in those days.
Did you?
Well, I'm coming to that. So what we used to do as kids was pick up what they used to call bumpers, cigarette butts in the street, take out the cigarette or the tobacco,
Get the last little bit.
and wrap it up in newspaper and smoke it.
Genius.
We never got sick.
There you go. Is that the secret?
I think there's there's a motive behind it all.
Mm.
But I got caught one day, and he said, "Want to play sport?" Yeah. Well, think about it, and virtually I've never had a cigarette since.
Did he smoke?
Yeah. He smoked until he was 60, then had a bit of a heart attack at work and recovered, and never smoked thereafter for 30 years.
So he died at 90, 91.
Yeah,
Wow, it's a good innings.
not bad. So, but the thing that I was getting round to with the old man was the fact that he was philosophical in the way he sort of approached parenthood and rearing the children. I can't remember him. Never once did I get a hiding from him.
Never yelled or.
Never yelled. It's quite remarkable. And his sort of guidance, plus the fact that two other features that affected me because they occurred young in life was there was the cub law, which said the cub does not give in to himself. The cub gives in to the old wolf.
Mm.
Now, if you apply that to the world and your life, it has a great range of meanings, doesn't it?
Mm.
So there was that, and then there was the scout law, which was basically off the Ten Commandments, which said, trusty, loyal, helpful, brotherly, courteous, kind, obedient, smiling, thrifty, pure as a rustling wine. And I've tried to apply those.
Isn't it funny that you can still recall that?
Hey,
Isn't it amazing that you can still recall the scout law?
Yeah. That, and then I've tried to apply those in life. And then one other thing that comes to mind, one other bit of advice I got was when I first moved in the tech section at APM, this boss said to me, look, I'll tell you three things. Stop, look, listen. Listen. Yeah, all right. And then you start to realise what he was saying. And when you apply all those facets together, that's it.
That's it.
That's life.
It's that easy, huh?
Yeah.
And you think that's helped you navigate life?
No doubt. And I often reflect and say how good I was. And then you stop, well, this happened. That's not quite
as I remembered
what
it.
you're supposed to do, is it?
So, speaking about sort of how you lived your life under those sort of guiding principles, was spirituality or religion ever part of your life? Or?
No.
And it wasn't part of the family life, as you said earlier?
I made mention of the fact that for some unknown circumstances, my parents got married back in the 1925s, something like that. Because one was Protestant, one was a Catholic. I don't know how, when, or why they got married. I've got no idea. But about that time, my brother was born. So that leads to a lot of possible conjectures. I don't know. But it was never discussed. My father never went back to the Catholic Church, whilst his mother and sister were still practicing Catholics.
There you go.
So something happened that caused the cessation of any religious talk in the family.
Okay.
And it's never been discussed. I can't remember my old man ever discussing religion. And as far as the kids were concerned, we were forced to go to Sunday school.
Yep.
When we got out of Sunday school, it was up to us
What to do?
whether. So I was always sort of sceptical.
Mm.
I don't know why. I'd never read the Bible.
It wasn't something you had to do at Sunday school
No,
or
but,
in school?
you know, the Bible, no. There was religious instruction once a week at schools, but nobody ever took any notice of that. Well, I didn't anyway.
Mm.
And I could never become engrossed in the subject. Two things, one thing really set me off. Well, two things.
Mm.
First of all, the minister that married us back in 1952, about 6 weeks after our marriage, he made headlines in the local paper as being a minister who was being charged with playing around with all the choir boys.
Wow.
Well, that was number one. And then number two was the fact at that time, there was enough scientific evidence being thrown around that, you know, the world was not created the way the Bible is supposed.
Mm.
And I was more inclined to accept the scientific facts. So that, religion was never discussed in the house. In all this mounting scientific facts says, yeah, it's not right.
Mm.
So I've become almost a total agnostic at the present moment. And nobody in the family tried to pursue it, force anybody to do anything.
Mm.
Everybody's gone their own ways, whatever. They don't know how, to what depth they went. But there were two aspects as far as religion is concerned. One is when my mother died, these two bigoted spinsters from my father's mother,
Yes.
who were up around about 90 at that stage, is reported to have said to my old man, "Have you ever thought of getting properly married?" I know no more than that. And he apparently just walked away. But why they would want to say that after 50 years or 60 years, Lord only knows. Right?
So it's never played
Never played any.
significance in your life.
Plus, the other fact is that I think's worthwhile mentioning is the fact that when I was started playing with Preston,
Mm-hmm.
my two closest mates married happened to be a devout Catholic.
Yep.
The other one was a member of the local lodge and deeply involved in that, and me, the agnostic. And the three of us, or the three families, were almost united as one.
Yeah.
So you couldn't have three totally different people,
Mm.
and yet there was never any mention or anxiety about religion.
So it was never a prejudice at
No.
that time.
No. No.
You've mentioned your sort of start of your career and your boss who gave you this advice. Stop.
Yeah.
Tell me about your career.
About my career,
Yeah. About your work. Do you look back on it
Well-
fondly?
before I start on that, I think about this a lot, and I feel as though I started school. I must have wanted to go to school. I started school a year earlier than I should have. I started school at 4.5, whereas most other kids were 5 or 5.5. So that I feel as though I was always a year behind learning as a youngster in my developmental years,
Okay.
right? And that it sort of
Is
carried
that,
on.
is that something that you came to a conclusion yourself, or was that something that was implied to
I
others?
think I've come to that conclusion myself. Over the years, I've sort of why this happened. So I was that sort of half a year behind. And I think that sort of carried on, that everybody was senior to me, everybody. And I'd been shown respect, to show respect. So I sort of gave respect to everybody. And that sort of carried on, that if somebody had something to say at work, oh, well, you must be right, because you're older than me. You know much better, know more than me. And that sort of turned out to be a little bit of a hindrance. Plus the fact that, as I said before, one of my setbacks has been my lack of knowledge and appreciation or use of the English language, both written and verbal. So that I've been always sort of struggling to write a good essay at school. You know, if I got 55 marks in English,
You were happy.
oh,
You've done well.
I've excelled, right? I know it might sound silly, but that was a fact. And I've realised that limitation is carried on right throughout my career. I was very happy to get involved. I loved getting involved and doing things. Going from the only job I could get, as it turned out, was that I missed out on English in my leaving certificate. I had to do a supplementary exam, which I subsequently passed, fortunately. But by that time, it was April, and I couldn't get a job anywhere. I finished up getting a job in APM as the office boy. So I ran around the mill with bundles of papers for 12 months. Got to know everybody. Eventually got the job, and that's when the boss said, stop, look and listen.
And what was your next, when you got that job, what was that role?
What was it like?
What was the role? What,
I was just a
technician?
member of the technical staff,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
A junior member. So,
How long did you work there?
But
How long did you work there?
in the technical staff, I never left the technical staff until 1970. And that was from 1947.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So you obviously
Oh, I
enjoyed
loved
working there.
Loved it. It was, in those days, as it turned out, the paper industry was transforming from what was called, we went from a tradition to a science, where people didn't know, the operators didn't know what was going on or why, but they knew with feel, touch and hearing they could control the quality of the paper that was being produced.
Okay.
Might sound a little bit odd, but that was a fact. And we're moving from there into a science and a technical control of the industry.
Okay. That makes sense.
It does make sense for the simple reason. Then when he said, listen, he said, you go down to the machineman and you start talking to the machineman and sit and listen and look to see what he does. And all of a sudden you would see this machineman jump up and go and do something. came back and said, "Oh, did you hear that?" So he knew what was the cause and what, how, but didn't know why. And the technical industry was moving into that why situation.
Yeah,
And everything was under control. So I found that absolutely fascinating. And being able to sort of carry out experiments both in the laboratory and then if you're in the right section, you go out into the factory and on those big machines you carry out those trials and see the results was, absolutely terrific.
So your role had sort of the combination of sort of the more theoretical, technical lab side, and then you got to apply that in the actual factory itself.
Yeah, it was, and the industry was a fascinating industry because you're actually dealing with cellulose fibres, which were something like about 3 millimetres, 4 millimetres length, the longest one, down to something like about 1.5 millimetres long.
Mm.
And here you've got these enormous machines producing at something like about 10 tonne an hour in the later days from these little bits of fibre. And here we are making the paper for everyday use. Fascinating industry, really.
Yeah. And what sort of role did you get to when you left? What was your most senior position there?
Well, it changed depending on the size of the mill that you're at.
So you changed the mill location?
I started, I was at Fairfield Mill,
mm-hmm.
in the technical department from 1947 to 1964.
Yep.
And then I was just a board mill chemist. I used to have paper and board, and I got the say of the board mill chemist, but then you had a technical superintendent above that who was one of the management group. And then I got transferred a real mill called Broadford, which is about 60 miles out of Melbourne, and I became the mill chemist. But it was only a little tin pot show.
Mm.
And after 18 months there, I got transferred over to botany as a board mill chemist. So I was virtually at the same level. But our
botany
mill.
That's when you moved to Sydney.
Yeah, Sydney. I'm sorry. Yes.
And what year was that?
1966. I moved to Sydney.
Yep.
And basically, that was at the how can I put it? The judgment of a Scandinavian whose name was Nardi Bone, and he was the chief works chemist for the whole company. And initially I thought he was a dodo. But in reflection over the years, and this happened a long time ago, he was one of the wisest and most intelligent persons I'd ever seen. His ability to put things, technical things, down in a logical, reliable sequence was unbelievable.
And did you come to this realisation whilst working with him, or
that was one of the things was that everybody would say, "Oh, Nardi Bone, what's that old fool doing?" But one of the things he did with his staff, and like in other aspects, but he believed that everybody had learned, maybe at the same level, at different mills, but they had something that they had in their repertoire that their counterpart here didn't have. And likewise, and he was hell-bent on marrying the whole company so that everybody knew as much about the industry as anyone else.
Mm.
And used to say, "Oh, how stupid," but how smart. How, and again, it was a time when technical aspects were sort of coming to the fore in industry.
Which was why it was such an exciting
Yeah.
industry to be in.
And he introduced this quality control system, and he was 30 years ahead of the quality control principles that they've got nowadays. He was remarkable.
So he was one of your role models in your career,
Well,
you'd say?
tried to think so,
Mm.
but I wasn't up to his standard. Far from it.
Maybe that's why I moved you to botany.
Yeah.
So, did you work with that company until you retired?
Yeah, from 70, there was a position going in the sales, a technical salesperson, to go out and handle complaints from customers about the quality of products.
And that was your final role.
That was my final job for 10 years.
And what, within your entire time at ABM, that's what it was, right? ABM, what was your favourite role?
My favourite role? Oh, I can answer that. I don't know. After about 6 years in the technical department, back in 1950 odd, I was given the responsibility of the mill, what they call was the mill water chemist. And it was my responsibility to keep control, or not keep control, but look after any problems associated with water throughout the industry, such as it started off by drawing water out of the Yarra River, cleaning that up, to dumping effluent into the Melbourne sewage system.
To recycle that and use that in the...
And the recycling process that went on in all the machines. So that I finished up virtually, I could almost put my hand on any pipe right across the factory, and I would know
what was running inside it.
What that pipe was handling.
And how many years did you do that role?
I did that for about 4 or 5 years.
Very nice.
I did become the most knowledgeable bloke in the place, because there had been developments and modifications that had taken place, and there was a transfer and change of personnel. And I was the only person that
still had the knowledge. That shows a lot of loyalty to be with one company for your whole career. Was that also something that was just what people did at the time?
That was standard practice in those days. See, my old man only ever worked for the Tramway Board, and there were several of them. That was basically standard practice. But if people did change, they'd only have 1, maybe 2 jobs.
Very different to today's.
Not like nowadays. Well, I've been in the job for 2 years. It's time I moved on. But there was such things in those days as loyalty, both ways.
A loyalty towards the employee as well.
Very much so. In as much that within ABM, to ensure they had loyalty, they used to have a social club, number one. Every month they used to have a dance in the mill canteen. They had a mill picnic where they shut the mill down for a day, and everybody, from the manager to the lowest bloke in my day, early on, as a paper boy went, and that was on the company paid for that. Christmas time, and it only happened to the staff, not the employees. Everybody got a Christmas present. So that, and if you, the staff in the main never signed off. They were always on time. If we wanted to have, if something happened that we needed a day off, okay. But because you did that, if you had to work overtime, you just worked overtime. No question. Just do it. Because the paper industry worked 24 hours a day anyway.
Yeah.
Right? So quite often, you'd be doing something and it'd go past you. 5 o'clock,
Yeah.
you'd send me home. See you later. You just stayed on. And nobody ever thought anything about it.
Yeah. Just completed the job.
It was part of it. Plus the other fact, and this didn't apply to all managers, but a lot of them did. If there was a mill visit going on, where he's going around the mill with some outsiders,
Mm-hmm.
the good managers virtually knew who the people were. May not know their names actually, knew what their job was and their position. And they'd be walking down the machine, and there'd be somebody sitting over there. He wouldn't stop and look, but he'd be sort of walking down, talking like I am to you, and he'd just go,
And that was a big deal.
well, the bloke is being recognised by the manager,
By a shake of the hand.
just by the shake of a hand.
Not even a, hey,
No,
Craig.
occasionally, something might happen that the bloke would ask a question and they'd call up an operator over.
And that was significant.
Oh, yeah. And the bloke and the manager would say, oh, well, thanks, Will. You got any questions for Will? Thanks very much. And he'd just back off. But, it was recognition of the staff that these blokes were important. But there are others who would sort of just go straight through. And the cooperation just didn't exist.
Yeah.
You were talking yourself about your relationships
Yep.
with your staff.
Yep.
That's no different than what was going on with them.
Yeah. Agreed. It's a very
It's important.
it's very important.
And unfortunately, to me, one of the greatest problems that happened to industry in Australia, and certainly the paper industry, is when, how can I put it, when they started to promote people with MBAs back in the 60s.
Yeah.
I can see you laughing.
Yeah. I'm listening.
And MBAs, for some unknown reason, captured the imagination of the board and the hierarchy, that anybody that had an MBA was outstanding.
Top of the school, huh?
That's right. And as it's such, these people could only think, they weren't all the same, but they could only think about the bottom line of a sheet,
A balance sheet.
bonus sheet, that's going to do their job. So what they tended to do in those days was to dispense with what they considered unnecessary function, such as engineers, maintenance people. So they outsourced them all. And in so doing, they lost all the expertise that these engineers had when they had to come and repair a machine.
Yes.
So instead of, the performances going up, they were going down because they were spending more time on repairing systems they knew nothing about Whereas before they outsourced these staff, they knew the problem. They'd encountered it once or twice before.
Mm.
Okay, we do this. Get the job done in half the time.
All right. Thanks for telling me about your career. Let's move on to your sort of early life with Nan, and I assume that you had how long were you married with Nan before you started having children? And tell me about that sort of stage of
52,
your
90, 70 years.
70 years with Nan, right? And how long after you were married did you have your first child?
4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
How old were you and Nana when you first had kids?
Oh, I was 22 when I was married.
Yep.
26.
And tell me about that time of your life.
Well, it was a very exciting time. I still consider myself a potential Brownlow medalist. It was a time when one of the main things in life, particularly when you got married, was to get a house of your own.
Mm-hmm. Which you got in Melbourne, in what suburb?
We actually moved in 1954.
Okay.
I spent a lot of time in that granny flat.
Yep.
Drawing up plans, writing letters to building societies, wanting to get money.
Yeah.
And every time I got any inkling of something going on, I was into it, up to the neck.
Yeah.
Trying to get the things. So that eventually we did get a loan, building society, after 2 years of marriage. And I'd drawn up plans for the house.
You drew them up.
Yeah.
You drew them up.
And I drew what I thought was right.
So did you draw a box with a triangle above it for a roof, or how detailed were your plans?
I don't know. I would draw a floor plan.
Yep.
Of the house.
Yep.
And the roof. That's what I thought it was going to be. I can't remember if that was right or not. But took it up to a builder. He said yes. So I said, beauty.
How much did that cost you to build the house?
Well, wait a minute. I was just going to, one stage before that. After we got married, of course, the first thing to do in those days, there was the expansion taking place in all suburbs. So we were living in Preston. The natural part was basically to go north into Reservoir and what is now what Whittlesea, but that's a long way off. So we used to look up the local paper for land.
Yep.
And this is not long after we got married. There was these 2 blocks of land in West Preston beyond the tram terminus. 2 blocks for £160.
What was your wage at the time?
Eh?
What was your wage at the time?
My wage would have been well, let me just go back one stage further. Yeah, you've you've asked the wrong thing. I started work.
We've done work.
No, I'm just going. It's important. I started work at 25 shillings a week.
Yep.
My mother said you have to pay 5 shillings a week board.
Yep.
Okay, and no problem. I gave her an extra 15 shillings. Jesus. I'd been known to her. So I lived on 5 shillings a week. I started work at the technical department and I went up to, I think it was 25, I think it was went up to £5 a week, which is equivalent to $10 here in Upton nowadays. So, and then I qualified after 6 years with natural increments every year. I finished up qualifying on 1750 pound a year.
A year.
1750 pound, right? And my father-in-law said to me at the stage, "You'll be a millionaire. You could be on $5,000 a year before."
Wow.
Shucks, turn it up. So that was my wage, 1750, and it might have gone up to 1900 or something like that, because I qualified the year we got married. Fortunately, I passed every exam on the final day of the exam prior to getting married.
Prior to getting married.
How lucky!
How lucky.
So
you built this house?
So we built the house. We got the house, and the builder said 1,336 pounds. Right. I had the money, and then I said to him, "Well, I can paint. Can I paint the house?" He said, "I don't want you to paint the house. It might spoil my reputation." I said, "I'll do a good job." So, the house was built. We painted, and we moved in 1956. 54. We had a table, kitchen table.
Yep.
A fridge, a single bed, mattress. That was it.
Luxury.
That's what we moved in, with some crockery and things like that. My first job was to build a double bed, and I built the double bed frame, and that became a wardrobe.
You obviously did a pretty poor job of it.
From there, I then built in wardrobes in the main bedroom. Along the line, and then we were able to turn the bed over, put a mattress on it, and we had a double bed. Going well. At the time, I was still working in paper mills, of course, but used felts for conveying the wet paper web through the machine. When they were used, they were still in good condition. And one of my jobs for years was to dye these felts, and people used to use them for floor coverings. So I'm not missing out. So I finished up dyeing enough of the felt, that we finished up virtually carpeting
the whole
house with this felt. We laid the underfelt, and by that time we had a Singer sewing machine. So here was paddle on the floor. And then we got those great stretches of felt.
Putting them all together.
Stitching together, and we carpeted the whole 3 bedrooms, the lounge, dining room. Oh, yeah.
So tell me about having your 3 children.
What?
Tell me about having your 3 children.
Do you really want to know?
Yeah.
I'll only say one thing about having them, is that I can still remember the occasion when Pat and I had intercourse relating to the first scene. There you are. How's
Fantastic.
that?
Not what I needed to know.
I told you you'd get some strange answers, didn't I?
Well, that's on record, so... So tell me about the kids. How were they when they were young?
Well...
How was your family life?
Very, very interesting. Because I was still playing football, at that stage. And I was still working. And towards when Rob was... when Pat was pregnant with Rob, I was actually working shift work, which I loathed. But the house, must go back because it's important. because we moved into this new area, undeveloped area, there was the roads hadn't been formed.
Mm-hmm.
They were just dirt tracks, no footpaths, and no sewerage. So we had a dunny out in the backyard,
Mm-hmm.
not at the back of the house, but in the backyard. So we would have to walk 10 yards,
Mm.
the middle of the night or something like that. This is in 1956, right? And we did that for about 4 years.
Yep.
The road, we suffered for about 6 years, and a couple of years later, we moved to Broadwood. So they were the early aspects of what life was
Like with children.
with children. We had a bus that came within 500 yards,
Mm-hmm.
metres of our place. And when Sandra was born, we have to wheel the pram through this thick black mud
No
whenever it
footpath.
rained. Life wasn't particularly pleasant, but then at 56, I bought an old Ford Prefect
Mm.
from a mate, one of the football mates, and we had a car. Because
Wow.
prior to that, I used to ride my bike
Everywhere.
everywhere to work.
Mm-hmm.
Not 80% of the time
You'd be riding the bike.
I was riding the bike.
And how were the kids when they were young? Were they
So yeah,
well behaved?
but
How are the kids when they? How was Shane and Sandra and
Well,
Rob?
wait,
How were they
I'll
children?
come to those. And Sandra went to school, which is just around the corner from us,
Mhm.
as it turned out. So that was okay. And she was the first, one of the first school children to get involved in the Cuisenaire method with the rods.
Oh yeah.
She was an experimental kid in that regard. But growing up, she was a sook. She was terrible.
Really?
She hated water. She wouldn't walk in a puddle, over a puddle, and complained about everything. But lived to change the day,
Mm.
as you can well imagine. Shane came along, and he was no trouble. And the same applied to Rob. But by that time, we had a car, and we had the sewage on. And with Rob, I think the roads might have been made.
Mm. And those early years of like an early family, how were they sort of difficult years, or were they?
well, the people I associated with were basically in the same boat as me.
Mm.
They'd sort of got married, had children, and we were sort of struggling
Together.
Well, I say struggling, developing our life in the same steps,
Mm.
so that we were, in those days, we used to mix.
Mm.
I'll tell you about those two other blokes' families, and we would have regular dinners at one another's place. We'd play cards, put the kids down to bed, pick them up, and then go our own way
Mm.
at night. So that there was a sort of a change in sort of
Family
living style.
dynamics.
Yeah. And even the neighbours, you became more friendly with the neighbours.
Mm.
Yeah, so, and if you wanted something, you never sort of frightened to sing out and get assistance. Yeah.
So, did you go on holidays with the family in those years, or
Well, let me talk about holidays.
let's talk
And
about holidays?
Number one, I cannot remember my old man ever going on a holiday until I was 17 years of age. What he did when he was on holidays, I can't tell you, but I know he and his wife never went on holidays.
Mhm.
Their first holiday was something over to Perth. So, it was something obviously he's looking forward to. As far as I was concerned, I had my first holiday when I was 6, and I went with my sister, I'm sure it was my sister, to one of my aunties who had a farm
Mhm.
out of Stawell in Melbourne,
Yep.
in Victoria. My second holiday was to the farm with my brother when I was 10.
Yep.
And the same place. And I can distinctly remember, that was during the war, of course,
Mhm.
and they used to get their paper delivered twice a week.
Okay.
They used to live out in the farm. I can remember getting the papers and putting them in chronological order and working out the war between the Tobruk rats and Rommel. And they used to have maps of Libya, and they used to have the arrows saying, the
Where the
pencil
troop movements
there.
were.
And I used to sit down and work out the maps and see if my thoughts were lining up. I used to sort of do that for about 3 weeks. And then my holiday, the first holiday then, was with some of the boys from the football club.
Mhm.
We went up to a place called Marysville, and had two weeks at a guest house there.
Mhm.
From then, uh, I didn't have a holiday until we got married in 1952.
Where'd you go?
Sydney, strangely so. Yeah, Potts Point.
Ah, lovely.
Sydney. Yeah.
And then what about holidaying with the children?
The where?
What about holidaying when you had children?
Well, thereafter, that was 52. We had the kids. I was still playing football, and I befriended a bloke called Houghton,
Mhm.
who eventually went up to uh, the Gold Coast. That's near enough, anyway. No, we went up to a place called Goodna at his father-in-law's expense, and they had a hay farm. And for many years, we went up and saw him and holiday together, those two, with that family, down on the Gold Coast. So I'd say from about 59 to about 66,
Mm.
we holiday virtually every year on the Gold Coast.
And hasn't your holidaying since then expanded? When you look at when your
For sure.
father never went on holidays, and then
Exactly.
you went on holidays sort of sporadically to
So
outside of Melbourne.
that's right.
Talk about your other holidaying adventures.
Well,
Some of the highlights.
gee, there's too many of them. But the first holiday, 1966,
Mhm.
I had long service leave coming. So we actually went across to New Zealand, holidayed in New Zealand, took the car and drove both islands. The odd part about that was that I made all the arrangements down in Broadford, virtually in Melbourne.
Mm.
We got transferred to Sydney. So rather than change the arrangements, we left Sydney,
To Melbourne.
went to Melbourne, said goodbye to our families, hopped on the boat and sailed to Sydney. And went around Sydney for a day, looking at Sydney, and then across to New Zealand, travelled New Zealand by car, which was terrific.
So you went on the boat from Melbourne to Sydney.
And boat, Sydney to Wellington,
Yep.
and then the ferry across to the South Island.
Yep.
Picked up a car,
Drove around.
drove around, came back to to Christchurch. Hopped on a boat there, went up to Wellington, and then did the North Island. And flew
Fantastic.
home,
Fantastic.
which was fantastic.
Is that, and where would that sort of rank?
Right. Oh, I'd have to rate pretty high because it was our
Sort of first.
big trip.
Mm.
Then
And did all the family were on that?
the three kids.
Yep.
I suppose the highlight of the boat trip was Rob got sick. He either had the mumps or something, so he was confined to the sick bed, which was at virtually at sea level. We used to go down and see him, and there was a porthole above his bed. So you can imagine how long we stayed. Yeah, but we were told we shouldn't get off the boat. I said, "Oh, we're going to a farm. We'd be isolated." So we were allowed to go, and we carried on our trip.
So where
Once again, my trusty Lord helpful. Right.
What's the best holiday that you've ever been on?
The best holiday would have to be South America, by far. South Africa, sorry. Living and mixing with the wild animals is an experience that you cannot describe. The exhilaration, the feeling you have is like no other. Then the next holiday would have to be Disneyland.
I knew that one was going to come.
No, but for sheer concentrated enjoyment
Happiness.
and happiness,
Mm.
there is no place like it.
Mm.
So, and then my favourite place was a place called Garmisch Park in Curtin. Because I've told you these all before.
Mm.
But it was during a fantastic trip that we did Eurail in Europe for 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
We came across this place and everything just fell into place. It's everything that I wanted to do. Like I wanted to go to see Neuschwanstein, Norwich Castle. And as it turned out, from Garmisch there was a bus trip on which I could use my Eurail pass.
Perfect.
Absolutely perfect. Fantastic. So we did that at no expense. So we spent a day going there and back. The pension we had, we opened up the French windows of a night. We had the Alps covered in moonlight.
Picturesque, huh?
There's just a few of the things that possibly don't mean much to people, but it's just so satisfying.
Yeah. Is there a holiday or a place that you haven't visited that you would like to go?
My desire for holidays have taken a dramatic downturn in the last 5-6 years. One place that's always been on the bucket list that I never got to was Iceland.
Why?
I don't know, other than the fact that I was standing in a queue one day waiting to go have a look at the Chinese ex-premier who died, having a look at his tomb, and I was standing next to somebody who had just been or lived in Iceland.
Mm.
And we're talking about the holidays, and they were saying, "Geez, what a wonderful place it is."
And that's all I grabbed.
That was enough to trigger something in the brain.
So you've done a lot of travel. Do you know how many countries you've been to?
I think if I classify as having put my foot
Yep, that's it.
just on the soil,
Yep.
I think it's 53.
So why do you think you've travelled so much?
Because Shane, when he was young, he went with his mate over to England or Europe.
Yep.
And they backpacked around the countryside. And that was sort of enough to sort of whet the appetite a bit. And then Sandra was going around with Glenn, working with Qantas, and he was doing nothing but travelling free to the rest of the world. And that was enough to
Grip the imagination.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, travel tech. What was sort of the hardest moment of your life to date?
Well, the hardest moment would certainly be the current times.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, mate.
Oh, Jesus. Ah. Oh, God. Yeah. Sort of watching it with him. Watching your grandmother. Yeah.
We didn't have to talk about it.
Deteriorate.
We didn't have to talk about it.
Go on.
Sorry,
Watching your
mate.
mother deteriorate
Mm.
to the stage where she's not a vegetable, but there's not much going on with her life.
Mm.
So trying to put up with that is pretty difficult. So,
Very difficult.
go on, it's all right.
I apologise.
Don't, whatever you do.
And so we spoke about it sort of before we started, but you know, obviously dealing with everything that's happening with Nan, you sort of spoke about the best way to deal with that is, you know, staying young and being around the youth and talking about the future and not talking about the past. And why do you do that? Why does that mean such a big thing to you?
Because I've seen so many old people just go into permanent decline. And that has been confirmed by when I've seen your grandmother in these nursing homes, that there must be something else that somebody can do to avoid that happening.
And you think the state of mind is
And
a significant part of that?
I am convinced wholeheartedly that you have to condition the mind. It can be done. They talk about the placebo effect, and I am convinced that if you're strong enough and you can use that placebo, then you'll achieve exactly what you want. So I'm always encouraged by when you see somebody on television, like that old bloke in England that did that
100 laps. Or
yeah,
at
100 with a wheelchair.
good effort.
Like he wasn't thinking about his own life or his misery. There was something else for him to look forward to and achieve. And I want to do exactly the same thing.
So do you think that attitude has been sort of paramount in you continuing to live like you are 91, you say you're 91 years young, and do you think that attitude has been paramount to you continuing to live independently, continuing to manage this home. You're telling me about
No,
ripping
look,
out these
there is
weeds
no
over
doubt.
here, and
There is no doubt about that. I am thoroughly convinced because I've got a friend, I won't mention his name, and he's got his wife in a nursing home, and has suffered possibly more traumatic than I have, traumatically I should have said, more than I have, but his life is just one of negativity, and
you think he's sort of given in.
yeah, no doubt about it. And whilst I think, possibly I've given in,
I don't think you've given in.
I try and say, no, I've got to try and do something. And I think there's still a lot to be
done.
But it's not the same attitude or aspect as what your generation's got or my kids have got, Shane and them got. They're all the time telling me, get up and do this, get up and do that. And, hey, I would love to do it. I would love to go out and have a game of tennis. I saw your mum and dad playing tennis the other night. And I thought, geez, I'd love to have a go at that. But knowing full well that I'll be using the racket as a walking stick, right?
Yep.
I would love to do it. Love to go out and have a game of golf and kick a football with you blokes. That's still there,
Yeah.
But you've got to realise you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
So, no, I've still got enough. I've got enough go to try and get myself involved with other people's activities.
Yeah.
To get involved in my own is not so paramount.
It's a bit difficult. So, you're in your, 10th decade?
Yes, your maths are good.
Thank you. Is there a decade that you look back that you could point out?
Oh, that's hard. But I would have to say the 6th decade.
Yep. 50s?
Which 1950s, 1960. I think that's right, isn't it?
Oh.
Is that the right decade?
Sorry. I'm talking about your decades. Anyways, doesn't matter. So the 50s were what? Your 30s?
10, 20, 30, 40. Oh, I don't know. Oh, 5th decades. The 1950s.
Yeah.
The 1960s.
Okay.
It would have to be.
Yeah.
Just look at it. I was lucky enough to qualify.
Yep.
I got married. I finished up with having a good job.
Yeah.
We got a house. We had kids. We started travelling.
Yeah.
What else do we want?
It sort of kick-started this whole new, everything else that has become, encapsulates your life.
It was like a flower coming out in the full bloom. Yeah. And the thing, I guess, that goes on from that, and you might be a question, is how will I consider my life? Is that a question?
Maybe.
All right, I'll stop. I'll stop with that.
No, tell me.
Well, people say, are you satisfied with life? Totally. I have achieved what I set out to do, which is what? Nothing.
To live a good life.
Life. But I've got a car. But you find that at my age, that the monetary things start to lose a lot of value. So I've achieved Well, I consider a good life.
Mm.
Lucky enough, with the assistance of Pat, to, uh, to produce a good family.
Yeah. Very
All of
lovely
which-
family.
All of which is showing, great signs of community, respect, and freedom,
Mm.
and the like. So what else do you want?
Seems pretty good to me, mate. Seems
Right.
we'd all be lucky enough to emulate it.
Well, we're lucky enough that we've not had to encounter. Look, there's been a few hiccups along the line, but lucky enough not to encounter, how can I put it, trouble with the law, sickness in the main, and so.
You think you've had a fortunate life?
Well, just think if somebody had got involved in drugs, badly in drugs, somebody had have turned nasty, started committing crimes
Mm.
of some description.
Yeah.
And the people respect, I think, all our associates seem to respect every member of the family,
Mhm.
and every member of the family respects them.
Mm. We are very
We're unique.
unique.
Somebody said,
Daniel
they often
Daniel
say that.
described it to me the other day, talking about relationships in other families that he's encountered, and he's realised the older he has become that the family situation that we have is not necessarily normal, which was something that he
Yeah,
thought was strange.
Well, I found that was first said to me by Agostini, that played soccer with Shane
Mm.
20, 30 years ago. And I looked at him,
Didn't understand it.
I couldn't understand it.
Yeah.
Then I started to realise what went on in other families
Mm.
that doesn't seem to go on,
In ours.
and yet,
Why do you think that is?
I don't know.
Well, you talked about good leaders before in work. You
Oh,
talked about
respect.
good leaders in sport.
Respect, I guess.
Does it come down from the top? Does it come down from
Well,
the example set by yourself and Nana?
well, it might have a lot to do with what Pat is, not me. So, no, it's, no, I look at that too. But there is, and I often think that my three kids are so dissimilar.
Mm-hmm.
It's still there, but he hasn't gone away.
Yeah, perfect.
It's so dissimilar in their outlooks on life that one could have imagined there'd be disharmony in the family. I don't know if you ever think that way,
No. Yeah.
but it would be very easy to run aground, and particularly when you've got another three sort of coming in with the in-laws.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't happen. There have been some pretty strong words said between the three of them, and yet, that's for the
With the
time.
in-laws.
In-laws,
Mm.
with the six of them,
Mm.
and they're not frightened to tell them that's not what I think.
Well, maybe that helps you stay closer, get along.
Well, it could easily do. So, and I'm very, very grateful for that situation to be as it is anyway. Yeah.
So, what are you most proud of in your life?
What do I?
What are you most proud of in your life so far?
The family.
The family? We have a good family.
I think so. I do. As I said, monetary things aren't critical.
No.
So, yeah. Oh, as far as I'm concerned, Lucy and Jack and the others, they're all part of the family.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
I apologise. I'm not trying to make you
Oh,
cry.
that's all right.
I'm not trying to make you cry. So we spoke about you. We spoke about your life, your family, everything else. Let's, as you like to do, let's look forward.
Step on.
Let's look forward.
Oh,
Where do you see the world going?
God. Oh, God. I don't know. I think about that when I sit here
Look at the stars.
and look at the stars. Where are we going?
Do you have concern for the future?
No, I don't have any. I would like to stay here. So, but that's inevitable. So, but I intend to live till I'm 100. How's that?
Hey, that'd be a good innings. You'd have to raise the bat.
I'm going to annoy a lot of people if I do.
No change from normal,
Yeah.
Pop?
No, too true. But what I do, I don't know. I think the time is coming when the garden gets a miss. I'd have to shift somewhere else.
Mm.
But what it to be, I think I'll just let it be. I'll still enjoy going to watch sport.
Cheering on the Swannies?
Huh?
Cheering on the Swannies?
Yeah, but then I've got to the stage now where, strange it may seem, the result is not that important. I've got this, as I said, I sit here and look at the stars and wonder, and sort of get back to each individual. You start to realise that the game or the participation in whatever you do is much more important than the result. I don't know if that sounds reasonable.
Sounds very reasonable.
So while I still like the Swans, I'd love to see the underdogs. Doesn't matter who they are, what they are. I love to see them come and rise to the occasion and defeat the more popular sides. And that might be just a state that I'm more concerned about the well-being of the underprivileged rather than the hoi polloi.
So, interesting. We've spoken about this before, but how would you describe yourself politically?
Briefly,
Politically. You talk about your
how would I describe myself?
fighting for the underdog.
Once again, I am most concerned that not enough attention is given to those dead people who are in desperate need for help. I think that is number one. I would think that the taxation system, that's getting away from the political aspect, but nevertheless associated with it,
Definitely.
is unjust. I think those people who have got smart lawyers have been able to avoid taxation, whereas the poor underdog who's got nowhere to go, if they're earning just sufficient money, has to pay the full amount of tax. I think somewhere along the line there has to be some reconciliation where there's a balance. You have to realise that, in actual fact, the richest person in the world really is no better than the poorest person. So that, and as far as politics in general, I would bar all political parties.
Yeah.
I think I've said this to you,
Yeah.
and everybody would be an independent representative of their own electorate if they so desire. But I think ultimately it may take a longer time to get a result of some major issue. I think you would get a better result in the long run in the future. The only other aspect I would talk about, and you've had this, but you're going to cop it, is the fact that I would create a party of the most eminent people
Mm-hmm.
in Australia, whoever they may be, and they would sit down and they would devise the future plan for Australia. They would
And these are not politicians?
on current performance, no. No, there are plenty of eminent people who are stable people,
Mm-hmm.
and to me, they would have to devise a plan of what we want Australia to be in 50 years, and that covers every aspect of life, which is an enormous task.
Mm.
But it's not impossible to do it if you want to get down and do it, and then produce a plan to say, this is what we can do, and then you can have steps in it to say what we are trying to achieve in 5, 10 or 15 years' time, right? And work towards that plan. And if it's agreed to, and it has to be agreed to, otherwise it won't work,
Mm-hmm.
then the governments of the day have to have only one motive: to work towards the end result. They cannot willy-nilly change their desires or what they would like to do every time there's an election.
Mm.
So the only way to do that is that you would have to set a clause in the system whereby the system or that program cannot be changed unless you have 95% agreement.
Yep.
And that would stop this turmoil that is created every 4 or 5 years. Right?
Yep.
So,
I like it.
well, so do I, but should I do something about it?
No.
Yeah.
Looking at the generations today and the generations in your day, do you think there's lessons that could be shared between the generations that maybe is missed?
Can be shared. Yes, yeah. Number one is that I think the younger generation should stop and think and discuss decisions which they are making today about their future, and give definite consideration of eliminating what they want to do now in favour of what they should be doing for the future. In other words, I guess it's to try and eliminate a bit of selfishness in everybody,
Mm-hmm.
because unfortunately, my generation and your parents' generation have a lot to blame for the way they have built and created your generation. By that, I'm not saying they've done the wrong thing, but what they have done is that they have made life just a little bit too easy for what they want.
Mm-hmm.
As I pointed out with when we built our house, what I had to do, and I only sort of just proved the hardships.
Mm.
But nowadays, your generation basically have a roof over their house, an air-conditioned house to go to. They've got a car or two.
Mm-hmm.
Holidays,
Many.
And where do they go to?
Overseas.
Overseas. What are they going to do in 10 years' time?
Space, mate.
So it's that sort of development that sort of worries me.
Is that does it worry you because our generation is growing up without sort of adversity in which they can learn from?
Yeah, I think so. Plus the fact that we made a big mistake in making life too comfortable for you. Because we went without.
Mm.
And I'm not criticising the fact that we went without, but we went without. But because we went without, when we got something, we appreciated it all the more.
Mm.
Whereas I have a feeling that nowadays the younger generation tend to accept everything for granted. And if I had to sort of work harder and suffer a little bit more, and I don't want to see them suffer, but, you know, they just don't get everything handed to them on a plate. They'd be better off. Now, I blame myself as much as anybody else. Like if the kids wanted to go and swim, they went to swim. If they had to get a new netball court or uniform,
they got it.
They got it.
Is there a way in which we can continue to increase quality of life and change attitudes to allow people to appreciate what they have?
Yeah, I think there is. And I think it's a fact that somewhere along the line, they must be taught or educated to really appreciate what they've got, what they can get, and what they can achieve. Is that due to the fact of all the technology that comes into play nowadays?
Mm.
I think, and that certainly plays a
massive
effect. Like, if you want to find out something,
just type it right into the computer.
There's the answer. You didn't have to do anything. Whereas, if you had to sort of sit back, delve, investigate, and then come up with that result, I guarantee that you would get a great deal of satisfaction in achieving that effort, irrespective of how big or small it was.
Mm.
And that's the type of thing I think is sort of missing nowadays. Plus a little bit of respect for other people.
Do you think the older generations have greater respect for other people?
Very generally, yes.
What about...
We weren't perfect.
What about when you start including culturally and diverse communities, sexually orientated, different sexual orientations, or do you think your older generation is more respectful in that?
No, I don't. I think you
miscued your answer.
You're putting too many variables into the one pot to get a simple answer in that regard.
But isn't that, you're talking about respect, isn't that?
Yes, but what I'm sort of getting at is that, as far as I was concerned, uh, the TGA, LP Green, K1 group, or whatever they're called,
Not close, but yes.
you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
I wouldn't have a bar of them in my day, younger days. I still do not want to have any association with them,
Mm-hmm.
but I do acknowledge the fact that they are human beings just the same and should get my total respect.
Well, that's progress.
Slight progress,
Slight progress.
slight, but
How would you have felt if one of the grandchildren?
I don't know. I don't know. Don't worry, I've thought about this many, many times.
Mm,
I just don't know how I would react. It would be, how can I put it? It's almost as though I'd be hurt. And I know it's not my fault and it's not their fault. But that was just my sort of upbringing. So that's, look, and I realise that in your family, or your mother's family,
Mhm.
it's rather paramount, isn't it?
It's always been what I've considered normal.
Yeah, you've just accepted, you've grown up.
Mm.
So, and I'm very proud and satisfied that the younger people can see that. But I've been, so steeped in the culture, it's bloody hard to change.
Mm.
Slowly I am.
Slowly.
And, but on the other hand, people of different nationalities,
Mm.
I can tolerate without the slightest question.
Do you think travel has helped you with that?
Oh, no doubt about that. No doubt about it. No.
Exposure to, different scenarios,
Yeah,
different
you just
people.
realise,
And you just realise, oh, wait, they're just
Yeah.
normal people.
yeah,
It doesn't
they're-
matter.
They're looking at me like I'm looking at them,
Mm.
and possibly laughing or sneering or whatever it may
Mm.
be. Yeah. And the only people I have a little bit of concern about is, you want me, I'm being honest.
I'm loving it. I got to hear about Sandra before. That was fantastic.
Are our Aboriginals.
Mm.
There's something not quite right in what they're trying to develop and create
Mm.
to be equal to or better inside than the white people, and the white person's attitude to do something about it.
Mm.
We're not getting anywhere. And I can't put my finger on it, but I always bring up the point that I can remember going through Fitzroy Crossing,
Mm-hmm.
and they took us past an Aboriginal settlement.
Yep.
They had built half a dozen nice weatherboard homes.
Yep.
I don't know how long they've been up, but not 50 or 100 years.
Yeah.
And they were an absolute disgrace.
Mm.
Why? Obviously because the Aborigines hadn't looked after it.
But maybe the Aborigines didn't.
But why hadn't they?
But maybe they didn't want it.
Well, I don't know.
Maybe we don't have the answers for them.
Look, I wouldn't disagree with any of your arguments,
Mm.
but when you consider the billions of dollars that have been spent on Aboriginal affairs
Mm.
over the last 20 or 30 years, there should have been some major progress.
But previously, before you were speaking about, as you've gotten older in your life, you've realised that the financial sort of metrics just strips back and it's provides no real sense of value or purpose to you. So maybe throwing billions of money at a problem that we maybe didn't understand was not the most effective way to do it.
Yeah, look, I wouldn't disagree with that.
Mm.
I wouldn't disagree. When we were on a bus trip, we went across the North End, the bus driver, and we were discussing the Aborigines,
Mm-hmm.
and he was saying, I can't remember what he said, whether it's not all their fault or it is all their fault. But that's right. The Aboriginal drovers drove the herds with the white people. The white people were getting a job, were getting paid. The Aborigines weren't.
Mm.
And the Aborigines started demanding money. So apparently the owners said, okay, we'll pay you, but you no longer have free rent down on the river for your whole family to live there.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have to get out and find your own accommodation. And I don't know what the end result was, but I know that there's now getting paid. But in so doing, they shifted contented families, Aboriginal families, off their home and pushed them into the cities or the towns, and they became homeless.
Mm.
So who's right and who's wrong?
I'm not sure.
And I know, but so what I'm getting at is there's always a couple of sides to the stories, and that everything that the white person has done for the Aborigines has not always been wrong, and not everything they've done has always been right.
Correct.
So I guess when you stop to think about it, the greatest development that has been made in trying to solve this problem you're talking about is sport.
Yep, I agree. Well, I agree that's had a significant impact.
Yeah.
Because
how far it's gone, I don't know.
Sport gives you some exposure, right?
Yeah.
And from there, you break down the barriers.
Yeah. One of the things that I forget what I was going to say about. I've forgotten. Doesn't matter.
Well, you know what, Pa? That may be a good spot to end it. I've had immense joy, learning a lot of things about your life that I didn't know. And listening to you, I've always had a lot of joy from listening to you, talking with you, discussing with you. As always, we like talking about these problems.
You'll read that, you'll say, holy dooly.
And once again, we've encountered a problem that we haven't been able to solve, but we do like talking about it. And all I can say, Pa, is that I have immense pride in you, and I am so grateful for your role in my life.
What are you going to do with it?
No, I'm just going to have it.
Are you going to show it to anybody?
People can look at it if they want, but I just want to say that I have such immense, pride of you and your role in my life.
Good.
Sharing sport with me, sharing the curiosity of learning with me, and just being a good role model.
I know what person will look at it. I'll tell you now.
I love you so much, Pa. Hey,
Lucy.
Lucy can look at it. They can all look at it. So thank you, Pa, and thank you for spending the time to do this little exercise with me. I hope it wasn't all horrible.
Oh no, it's just that I have a pseudo attitude to not showing how weak I am. Yeah.
Well, maybe something from our generation that
so
you're allowed to show your weakness, Pa. It's human. It's life.
So anyway,
thank you, Pa.
I had fun. Just don't go. I want to get a list that I made up.
I do have to go, Pa. I do have to go.
All right.
I'm going to stop this. What's your list?